I'm curious when, when it comes to innovation, a lot of times we talk about, if you want to kind of think about where you go in the future, you have to think about three things. You have to think about how do you maintain your current business today, and that's one of the things we've been talking about. And then there's also understanding what part of your business are you leaving behind, and what part of your business are you going to go towards. So,
Yep.
so I'm curious, and as you've been in the survival mode, and as you put yourself in a position to say, I want to be that seedling that can grow in the forest after a fire, because there's less competition, for lack of a better term. Are there things that you've done now that you think are going to be part of this growth in the future that are more than just survival mode? I'm curious if you've identified or been able to identify things like that.
Yeah, definitely. So, so those three programs mentioned during the pandemic phase,
Yep.
there are a lot of merits for the future.
Okay.
And also, we combine other kind of, we have also other programs we're working on, trying to basically plan for the kind of a reopening phase and also post-pandemic phase. So the key, that's kind of come back to the definition of what Junzi Kitchen doing. So Junzi Kitchen right now, you can see a few restaurants we're operating. It's a kind of Chinese fast casual, a new brand, new feelings of Chinese food, new dishes, new model. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do is Chinese food in America is such a legacy of the cuisine, and that legacy cuisine has a lot of memories in America exist. But in the meantime, that legacy can have a lot of potential growth because there's a lot of potential dishes being introduced here.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese food, in the meantime, one of the largest ethnic food in America, but the Chinese food in America has only covered a small fraction of what Chinese food really capable of. So that's when we'll see the potential is a good foundation right now, but also huge potential in the future of the IPs. So that basically, if you consider food is a kind of knowledge or common memories, what's common memories right now in the US is large, but compared to what it can be, also small. So the huge potential there. But the problem Chinese food fundamentally is the dependency on the low efficiency of labor. What we meant that is basically you can translate into a different way of describing it. Previously, Chinese food owned by mom and pop stores everywhere. They operate. It's really difficult to operate it, but they pull it off because Chinese people work really hard. They work in the whole family. So they suck out a lot of cost inside their families. It almost feels like self-exploitation to sell a lunch special $5.50. And that lunch special is not easy to cook. It's not like flipping burgers. It's not making Subway sandwiches. There's actually difficulty to do that. Maintain 200 items menu on a small Chinese takeout. So those food right now is hard to make, although people still like it, just because the Chinese families doesn't want to do that anymore. Their success, so they want to put their kids in better college so that they won't come back. And their family, so I gotta retire because my kids doesn't want this, and my mission accomplished. So then they just shut down stores. So Chinese restaurant closed in the past 5 years, more than open, just because retirement of Chinese people, immigrants, and because China itself doesn't have the kind of poverty issues like they had 20 years ago. So in 1990, the kind of GDP per capita in China was $300 per capita. At the moment, America is about $24,000. It's 80 times than China. There's no opportunity cost come to the US to find American dream. But right now, it's a different story. You look at all the people come to America, it's become the rich expats for better education or for better security or whatever. Mm-hmm. So the poor people doesn't want to come to America because why? They can find a better job in China, which like GDP in China right now is about $10,000. In some part of China, it can be $30,000. So you can find a decent job and live here with your own people. Doesn't want to stay in like with discrimination or other things. So you don't have to come to all the U.S. with all the immigrants kind of processes on debts to the smuggling people to do that anymore. So there are no new Chinese immigrants come to the U.S. to do these labor works. So that's why the Chinese restaurants dying in the U.S., where the kind of demand still sustains or even increases because of awareness of the culture changed. The pandemic become a kind of from slow death into sudden extinction kind of scenarios. A lot of people just, okay, that's it. I don't want to work anymore. I'm too old for this shit. That's kind of feelings. A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
So then what we're trying to solve at Junzi Kitchen is we need to find a model for the future, a model of changing labor efficiency. That means you're more efficient to make a food, probably less varieties, but better qualities, and people recognition become better. In the meantime, can utilize a lot of modern technologies such as automation, centralization productions, rather than chopping your ribs from at 8 a.m. in your own restaurants. And also better branding, so you can charge a little more than just $5.50 with just that cheap Chinese food from your neighborhood. So this kind of three-part branding operation without dependence on Chinese labor, this all together is what Junzi Kitchen trying to invent. So the first phase in past 5 years, we kind of it's fast casual phase, which we saw successful Chipotle and the Three Greens can apply those models into Chinese food. But I think the past 5 years does have a change of American labor price, with a change from $10 to around $15, especially in the urban environment. That model of the supply, the assembly line, is becoming less viable because the efficiency of labor changed. If you have 50% of increasing labor cost, it won't work. So we're kind of this pandemic actually gave a perfect opportunity to change that model from a more dependent customer service into more like using online kind of user experiences, and the food making process from back end could be more efficient. So you can get we did like a kind of called chicken index. So we compare the price of labor of minimum wage divided by the Chipotle chicken bowl. So you can see from Texas, Austin, the price is probably $1 per. So it's like one ratio. It's like I forgot exactly the $7.99 of minimum wage, and divided by $7.99 chicken bowl. But in New York City, that's like $15 divided by like $9.50 something, $9.49 something. So that means that the ratio is more 1.6. So that means 60% more kind of cost to make a Chipotle bowl. And the worst part probably
you're blowing my mind right now. The way you're approaching this is so strategic in nature. That I don't think most people think of, and I know your goal is to scale Junzi, but I don't think most people think when they walk into a restaurant, the amount of thought that somebody like you could be putting into this. Even creating something as like the chicken index, to look at the cost of labor, versus your supplies. This is fascinating to me, and I'm kind of struggling for words, because I think there's so many great things you've said. Even for Junzi Kitchen, right? Like you've talked about the overall trends that make you say, hey, like this is the place to be. Restaurants are shutting down, but it's not a result of demand for the food. It's the result of the owners themselves retiring and not either wanting or not finding somebody to pass it on. And your view is that this pandemic is an accelerant that's just going to create an opening for you even faster
Yep.
than pre-coronavirus. But
Yep.
even then, I mean, even then, as you're saying, yep, like this is working for me, um, you're still taking a step back and saying my model right now still needs to shift. And right now the shift is, hey, my model's working in terms of what I expected for demand for the food is solid, if not, rising. Supply of restaurants is going down, but now my main risk right now is this labor cost as tracked by the chicken index that you've created. So
Yep.
sorry for cutting in, but I am just you were taking this in a direction I had not imagined. So where are you going from here? Like as you look at the chicken index in Texas versus the index in New York, is it about shifting geographic locations for Junzi Kitchen expansion, or are you going to adjust in some other way? Like where are you thinking about going from here?
Well, it's you're gonna think about a few things. I mean, on a bigger picture. So I probably threw too much information here in this conversation because there's a lot of bigger picture. Is in the past like 20 years, America goes through this, enjoys the kind of globalization and the re-urbanization. So the Three Green and Chipotle's success is basically about that kind of globalization of supply chain, kind of urbanization, just cosmopolitan kind of values of people to enjoy that kind of overall liberal kind of feelings, right? Care about environment, all this together is kind of these more kind of progressive feelings of the younger generation, millennials.
Mm-hmm.
But this coronavirus and also the U.S.-China relations make the world become more kind of there's kind of deglobalization that happen in the next probably even 10 years, and the de-urbanization again because people technology-wise they're capable of not staying together to be able to work effectively. Um, so a lot of value could change again in terms of how it's going to depression of the economy can happen. Recovery could be slow, and the kind of openness to new culture, new things, curiosity of new things could be declined. You're going to stay with something you're more familiar with, and the buying power going to decline, but the cost going to increase just because low efficiencies of supply chains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All these things together will face a decline of the quality of life in sometimes. So how to cater those as a food providers, and also the competition will be more intensive because while all the smaller local competitors have died, but they're bigger players right now extend their arms to compete with you. How to do that competitions. So all the things together is like we have to find a new model that can hit all these things we need hits. That doesn't depend on Chinese as immigrants as hard workers to work. There are no more of them. It doesn't depend the curiosity of people to provide new flavors. So it doesn't need education, right? The high efficiency of people to making the food. So you can even get if a position can make $1,000 of worth of sales, that's great because that position could the cost potentially around $200 a day.
Mm-hmm.
So 20% labor costs create great rooms for other kind of rooms for platform fees, commission fees, other things for deliveries, and use new technology operations such as automations and centralizations. So that has to be done, and also probably new model of development of expansions as well. So what we're trying to create a new model today is we call it a nice day Chinese. So this model is like this, right? So first of all, it's a traditional Chinese takeout kind of menu in the ballpark. Traditional Chinese takeout does have 200 menu on their items. We kind of shrink down into our 20 dishes to 25 dishes, which occupy about 80% of their sales anyway. Mm-hmm. And we can make 4 people work to create $4,000 of sales with support of a prep production from a commissary. That model doesn't need change any equipment. or doesn't need too much equipment from the traditional chain takeout. So which means when all the takeout is getting out of their business, their real estate, their lease, their equipment is there. You can acquire those locations easily. And because every neighbor has a bunch of Chinese takeout, you can evaluate, find the best one to buy from, or they can just take from there because they want to sell. So with that expansion, you can hire local people with ease of operations, and you can acquire location really quickly and also low risk, and no competition because all the previously operated want to go out. So, and then that efficiency can be as high as 3 times over previous ones. The previous Chinese restaurants about efficiency about $300 to $400 per person per day, but you can get $1,000. Great. That's kind of the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with a better brand, because most Chinese food doesn't have a brand. Probably 95% of stores in America doesn't have any brands. They only have a Panda and P.F. Chang's. So we'll do better in branding and also communication with all the live on internet UI UXs. So we can make the communication much more efficient. So all the things we're doing today can merge into that future.
Yeah, and it sounds like this is the future you'd already envisioned pre-coronavirus.
Yes.
The opportunity, the overarching like demographic changes, industry changes, those existed 2 months ago. This
Yep.
is the vision you wanted to go to, and so some of the things we talked about earlier for what you've done to just stay alive, during the last 8 weeks. In your mind, you're like, well, I would have to do this already. This is just a way to accelerate my testing of my ideas that I can be more efficient and I can condense my menu to 20, 25 items, and I can build a brand and I can serve people with just as much value or more value than they were getting before.
Yep.
Interesting. So again, this is fascinating to me, just the way you've approached this, and it's to me it's such a smart way of doing it, which is saying I've got this model already. I'm just going to take this opportunity that I wasn't planning for to test the model out, and it sounds like so far the feedback you're getting is, yep, I'm not questioning my original vision. So what is Junzi Kitchen looking like a year from now, 3 years from now, in your mind? And I think it's probably kind of my last question is like, where do you see yourself going if you were to predict, take advantage of this stuff?
I mean, I think we want to, so in 1 year, so we want to kind of reinvent Junzi Kitchen. Basically, there are potentially 2 models. One model is a Chipotle of Chinese food.
Yep.
So that model is still potentially be viable in the urban environment, still relatively higher traffic, larger stores, and so in the brick and mortar experience, people kind of still fitting those kind of customization based food, but you shifted your experience from in the store to more online, so you don't need people to talk to each other all the time to improve your efficiency of labor. In the meantime, we're gonna try to kind of do this kind of acquisition style of expansion for a brand for suburb called Nice Day Chinese. Just this is basically more like traditional American Chinese takeout menus rather than some kind of innovation menu based on customizations. So people feel still very familiar with what they're dealing with a very kind of elevated but still very familiar kind of experiences with Chinese takeout. So because it's acquisition based, so it can expand pretty fast. So compare with the Junzi Kitchen, that expansion could be tremendous, 3 times faster.
Yep.
So it's more exponential growth can happen to take over the market. And then with that foundation of this expansions, our supply chain will get much more efficient. So we'll be able to become our own supply chain company, because that's for the upstream of the Chinese food. It does need more efficiencies as well. So we can utilize a lot of technology from China for Chinese food right now currently available, such as automation of walking, stations, all the cooking stations can be better, to fundamentally improve the efficiency of Chinese food in America and the branding in America as well. By then, we'll become a kind of company provide not only the just food to the customer, but also the infrastructure for Chinese food industry. So the ingredients, supply chains, even this knowledge, consultings, and also investment fundings. So it become this kind of multi-branch kind of company to be able to become the new leader of Chinese food, to redefine what's next phase. Because Chinese food industry historically, this is probably the fourth phase where trying to pushing. The first phase was this kind of um, before the Second World War, or during the World War II, kind of from 150 years ago of a gold rush to end of this World War II era, that's chop suey and Ike Fuyang kind of era. And after World War II, there's a lot of elites from China came to U.S. After the Chinese Exclusion Act is lifted. So they reinvented Chinese food. The leader is Cecilia Chan, who is the 100 years old, the queen of Chinese food, still alive and calling us all the time. Our investor and advisor type of person who kind of redefined Chinese food in the 60s and 70s. And then there's, after the 80 and 90, there's the whole reinvention of Junzi chicken. Today's menu is from that phase. And we're defining this kind of new phase with modernization, branding, and supply chain and business model. How can we kind of find a truly locally sourced labor, but locally sourced the food, and the new culture of it, kind of combining what's happening as the real Chinese food movement in China and to the local market as well. That's the future. So that's fundamentally what we're trying to do in this kind of a longer period. And eventually, what the vision of Junzi is, as the name indicates, is in a traditional Chinese culture, in the Confucius context 2,000 years ago, Junzi means a person with integrity. So this person is a community leader with integrity, care about balance and health, but also fundamentally is a leader for the people. So we want actually think that the food as one of the most important of the Chinese culture is a great carrier of this kind of communication culture. And with more cultural communication, the people can live more peacefully with other people. So say, if you don't have any culture from communication with other people, it's very easy to have conflicts and wars. But now with more understanding of lifestyle, more communication, you potentially have less willingness to have conflicts. So the worst thing that can happen to humanity is the Third World War. Probably that's going to be the last World War. And that power shift and culture shift in the US from, and also the East and West part of the world has a huge potential for the humanity's future. So I think Junzi for the long run does have the kind of responsibility to become the bridge of more cultural communication and with food, with better food every day. So we can make this bridge, so have less risk of this extinction of humanities. But that's kind of what the long run we think Junzi can do, for just combine, make people more like together. But from today, it's like we need to define this should be a viable business as a billion-dollar company, which is huge opportunities. But if we get there, for long-term vision, we have a more bigger goal, to help the people.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about it is you're more than just 4 or 5 locations right now. You're 4 or 5 locations with a vision to the future to expand, and with that expansion, it's not just about becoming a billion-dollar business. It's about creating within communities beacons of representing the Chinese culture in the most positive light possible,
Yes.
with integrity, not only from a food standpoint, but also just from this is who we are, and the more that we know one another,
Yep.
the more that we can bridge gaps.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is fascinating. This conversation, went in a direction that I had never imagined it would go in. It's amazing to talk to somebody I think that has such a strong vision for the future. But in addition to the vision, has clearly in your mind you've articulated the levers. You're thinking about the levers. You're thinking about what are the next steps. So I'm curious if people want to get involved with Junzi Kitchen or Nice Day, Chinese, this kind of neighborhood concept. What are ways that they can get involved or connect and be a part of this vision?
Well, yeah. So this vision need a lot of, I would say, need a lot of participation from the resource perspective, from a people perspective, from a money perspective.
Yeah.
So that vision need a lot of people to work hard and try different things to be able to pull it off. So we keep raising money. We have a new round that's coming soon for post-pandemic kind of expansions. So we do have a pretty quality kind of investment firms already participate to us. But also for our vision, always we want to connect with American society, even the global society. We have investors from all different countries to think the vision is viable, even because this idea could apply to different markets, not only in here, because any markets can have probably similar issues for Chinese food. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of interesting investors, such as co-founder P.F. Chang's, the Queen of Chinese Food, and also the current president of Union Square Hospitality Group. So these kind of like industry leaders really think we kind of doing something that can be really valuable for the future. So we're open to more and more people want to participate as well to our communities. So that's one thing. And also, I think when we get our business going, there's a lot of opportunity for us to work with other partners to expand from supply chain technology, from a marketing networks perspective. There's a lot of hiring going to happen in the future when we kick off these models, definitely. And also, supply chain wise, there's a lot of demands on each services as well.
That's I mean that makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like you've got the right foundation, and it sounds like you have the right advisors in place right now, and you are building an organization designed to scale and expand rapidly in the future in a big way that can make a big impact.
Yep.
Well, hey, I appreciate again you taking the time to sit down with me. This has gone in several different directions I hadn't imagined, but I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, it's longer than we thought.
Absolutely.